Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you the new science fiction stories for you, and new adventure, new world.
They called her the ghost of the academy, but not because she was deadly, because she was invisible. 3 years in the most prestigious military institution in the galaxy, and no alien there could remember her species existed. Until the day her name appeared on every screen, every frequency, every language, all at once. And that was when the universe finally looked up from its screens and realized the quiet ones have been taking notes the whole time. The Xylanthian Academy of Strategic Command sat on a floating platform above a gas giant, its spires cutting through clouds of amethyst and gold. It was the kind of place that produced legends. The kind of place where species from 100-star systems sent their best, their brightest, their most ruthless. Cadets trained in zero-gravity combat, xenopsychology, fleet tactics, and the fine art of diplomatic assassination. Graduates went on to command armadas, govern colonies, rewrite the laws of interstellar warfare. And then there was Lia Chun. She arrived on a transport shuttle that smelled of recycled air and desperation, her single duffel bag containing exactly 3 changes of clothes and a tablet loaded with centuries of human military history. She was 19 years old, the first human ever admitted to the academy, and she had been given the tour by a Vrakther cadet who kept checking his datapad as if expecting her to vanish. "You'll be in dormitory section 7, the Vrakther said, not meeting her eyes. His name was Kthar, and his species stood 7 feet tall, armored in natural chitin, with 4 arms that could crush steel. It's the oldest section, mostly storage now. Lia said nothing. She just nodded, picked up her bag, and followed. The first month was the hardest. Not because the training was brutal, though it was, but because she wasn't sure anyone actually saw her. In the mess hall, cadets from a dozen species would shuffle past her table, as if it were empty. Instructors called roll by species designation. Xylanthian? Present. Vrakther? Present. Hern? Present. Then a pause. Then, human? Present, I suppose. She sat in the back of every lecture hall, took notes in neat handwriting, and never raised her hand. Not because she didn't have questions, she had thousands, but because every time she opened her mouth in those first few weeks, the silence that followed was louder than any insult. The other cadets would glance at her, then at each other, then look away. The message was clear. You don't belong here. You're a curiosity, a mistake, something the academy will correct soon enough. One night, about 6 weeks in, she found herself standing on the observation deck, staring at the gas giant below. The clouds swirled in slow, majestic spirals, and in the distance, a freighter burned toward the shipping lanes, its engines barely visible as pinpricks of light. She felt small, smaller than she'd ever felt. Back on Earth, she'd been valedictorian of her class. She'd scored in the 99th percentile on every aptitude test. She'd been selected for the Academy because the Galactic Council had mandated that underrepresented species be given a chance to prove themselves. Underrepresented. That was the term they used. What they meant was irrelevant. Hey, she turned. A cadet stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the corridor lights. It took her a moment to place the species. Aurelian, small and furred, with large eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. They were known for engineering, for patience, for a near-autistic attention to detail. Most species found them boring. Hey yourself, Lia said. The Aurelian stepped closer. Up close, she could see the name patch on his uniform. Jorvith. You're the human, right? The only one. That's me. I've been watching you. Lia raised an eyebrow. That's not creepy at all. Jorvith's ears twitched. Aurelian smile. That came out wrong. I mean, I've been watching your work. Your tactical analysis essays. They're different. Different how? He sat down on the bench next to her, his small frame barely making a dent in the cushion. Everyone else here thinks in straight lines. Attack here, defend there, flank left, flank right. But your solutions, they zigzag. You used a cargo hauler as a decoy in the last simulation. Nobody thinks of cargo haulers. Lia smiled for the first time in weeks. Cargo haulers have the same engine signatures as military transports if you boost their power output to 140%. They burn out after 20 minutes, sure, but you only need 15. Jorvith stared at her. How did you know that? I read the specs. Everything has specs. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, the other cadets think you're quiet because you're scared. But I don't think you're scared at all. I think you're waiting. Waiting for what? For them to notice you. Lia turned back to the gas giant. Something like that. The academy's training was divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 was academic, tactical theory, xenobiology, linguistics, and the 1,000 other subjects a fleet commander needed to understand. Phase 2 was physical and psychological, endurance tests, combat drills, survival scenarios. Phase 3 was command simulation, live exercises where cadets were placed in charge of virtual fleets, and their decisions determined their final rankings. Lia aced Phase 1, quietly, thoroughly. Her exam scores were so high that the instructors double-checked them, then triple-checked them, then called her in for an oral examination to make sure she wasn't cheating. She wasn't. She'd simply memorized everything. Every manual, every historical battle record, every technical specification for every ship in the Galactic Registry. The Xylanthian proctors were baffled. Humans, they'd been told, had limited memory capacity. They forgot things. They made errors. But Lia remembered everything, and her errors were strategic. How do you do it? One of the proctors asked her after the oral exam. He was a Xylanthian elder, his skin the color of old bronze, his 4 eyes unblinking. Do what? Remember all of it. The data volume exceeds known human neural capacity by a factor of, well, by a lot. Lia considered the question. She could have explained about neuroplasticity, about mnemonic techniques, about the fact that humans had been training their memories for millennia long before they had writing, let alone computers. She could have mentioned that her grandmother, a woman who'd never finished high school, could recite entire novels from memory after a single reading. But she didn't. I take notes, she said. The elder stared at her. Then he dismissed her, and she returned to her dormitory, where she found that someone had left a dead fish on her pillow. Not a symbolic dead fish. An actual dead fish from the Academy's aquaculture tanks, beginning to smell. She disposed of it without comment. Phase 2 was where things got interesting. The endurance test was held in the Academy's environmental simulation chamber, a massive dome that could reproduce any planetary condition in the known galaxy. For this exercise, the instructors had chosen a standard desert world. Temperatures reaching 50 degrees Celsius during the day, dropping below freezing at night, no water, minimal shelter. The cadets were divided into teams of 4 and told to survive for 72 hours. Lia's team consisted of herself, a Vrakther named Drask, a her named Vel, and a Xylanthian named Zer. Drask was 7 feet of muscle and chitin, perpetually angry, and deeply resentful of being paired with a human. Vel was a hern, a species that looked like walking moss, slow-moving and gentle but capable of photosynthesis. Zer was the Xylanthian, tall and elegant, with the kind of casual superiority that only a member of the founding species could muster. This is a disaster, Drask said, not 10 minutes into the simulation. 3 of us and a pet. I can't hear you, Lia said. Good. Then, you know what I think. Vel said nothing. Vel rarely said anything. But Lia noticed that the hern had positioned itself between her and Drask, a subtle gesture of protection that she didn't know how to interpret. The first day was brutal. The heat hit like a physical force, and within hours, Drask's chitin was cracking from dehydration. Vrakther were built for cold worlds, not deserts. Sarah was faring better, but still struggling. Xylanthians had a high tolerance for heat, but they needed water every 12 hours. Vel was fine, converting sunlight into energy, but the sun was merciless, and even the moss creature was beginning to wilt. Lia was fine. Humans were persistence hunters. They'd evolved on a savanna, chasing prey until the prey collapsed from heat exhaustion. She'd known about the Desert World simulation before she even arrived at the academy. It was legendary, a rite of passage that most species failed. But humans? Humans have been living in deserts for 100,000 years. By nightfall, Drask had collapsed. Sayre was not far behind. Vel was alive, but useless, its slow metabolism unable to produce the energy needed to help anyone else. And Leah? Leah had found water. "We need to move," she said, kneeling next to Drask. The Vrakthar's eyes were glassy, his breathing shallow. "There's a cave system 3 kilometers north. I saw it from the ridge." "You saw," Sayre's voice cracked. "The ridge is 2 kilometers away. You walked 2 kilometers in this heat." "I walked 4. I went out, found the ridge, spotted the cave, came back." Leah pulled Drask to his feet. Or tried to. He was 3 times her weight. "Vel, can you take his right side?" "Sayre, his left." "You expect us to carry him?" "I expect you to survive." And right now, surviving means moving. They moved. Slowly. Painfully. Drask was barely conscious, his chitin flaking off in dry sheets. Sayre kept stumbling, his elegant limbs trembling with exhaustion. Vel made soft, Anfu sounds that Leah couldn't understand but found strangely calming. 3 hours later, they reached the cave. Inside, it was cool. Dark. There was a trickle of water running down the far wall, and Leah had brought containers, improvised from her own uniform, sealed with a heat-activated adhesive she'd packed in her emergency kit. By the time the sun rose on the second day, all 4 of them were hydrated, sheltered, and alive. Drask woke first. He looked at Leah, at the water trickling down the wall, at the cave that had saved them. His 4 eyes narrowed. "How did you know?" he asked. "Know what?" "That the cave was here. That there was water. That we could make it." Leah shrugged. "I looked. You looked." Drask made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "You looked, and the rest of us were dying." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, where I come from, we respect strength. Physical strength. The ability to crush an enemy. But you don't have that." "No," Leah agreed. "I don't. But you have something else." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The words spread slowly at first. A whisper in a mess hall. A note passed between cadets during tactical theory. The human found water. The human carried a Vrakthar. The human didn't even look tired. By the end of Phase 2, Leah had stopped being invisible. She wasn't popular, far from it. But the other cadets had started to notice her, to watch her, to wonder. And then came Phase 3. The command simulation was the Academy's final test, the crucible that separated officers from cadets. Each participant was given command of a virtual fleet, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and support vessels, and pitted against an opposing force in a series of strategic scenarios. The scenarios were designed to test everything: tactical flexibility, resource management, crew morale, and the ability to make impossible decisions under pressure. Leah drew Scenario 47, Defense of the Kethros Sector. The Kethros Sector was a nightmare. A vast nebula of ionized gas that scrambled sensors and communications, dotted with asteroid fields and dead planets. The defending force, her force, consisted of a single carrier group, outnumbered 3-1 by an attacking force that had already overrun the outer colonies. Scenario 47 had never been won. The best anyone had ever managed was a strategic retreat, preserving enough of their fleet to fight another day. Leah studied the scenario for 3 hours. She mapped the nebula's drift patterns, calculated the density of the asteroid fields, cross-referenced ship capabilities with environmental tolerances. And then she made her plan. The other cadets were watching. The simulation began at 0800 Academy time. Leah's fleet deployed in a standard defensive formation. Carrier at the center, destroyers on the flanks, cruisers screening forward. The attacking force, a mix of alien vessels with superior firepower, advanced in a tight battle group, their commander clearly expecting a quick victory. Instead, Leah did something no one had ever done in Scenario 47. She split her fleet, not into 2 groups, Not into 3. She split it into 12 individual ships, each one operating independently, each one following a different flight path through the nebula. The destroyers dove into the asteroid fields, using the rocks as cover. The cruisers vanished into the ion clouds, their signatures scrambled beyond recognition. The carrier, the most valuable asset, headed straight for the enemy, broadcasting a distress signal on all frequencies. "What is she doing?" someone whispered in the viewing gallery. No one answered. The enemy commander, seeing the carrier approaching alone, took the bait. They moved to intercept, their battle group spreading out to surround the apparently defenseless ship. But as they closed in, Leah's scattered fleet emerged from the nebula. From the asteroids came the destroyers, their guns blazing, targeting the enemy's engines and propulsion systems. From the ion clouds came the cruisers, launching waves of missiles that the enemy's distracted point defense couldn't stop. And the carrier? The carrier wasn't defenseless at all. It had been broadcasting fake distress signals, but its fighter wings were intact, and they launched now, swarming the enemy like insects. The battle lasted 22 minutes. When it was over, the enemy fleet was shattered, 20 ships destroyed, another 15 disabled, the rest fleeing in disarray. Leah had lost 3 destroyers and a cruiser. She'd won scenario 47. The viewing gallery was silent. Then, someone started clapping. Then, someone else. Then, the room erupted. But Leah wasn't done. The win was impressive. Academy Records would later call it the most creative solution to scenario 47 in the institution's history. But what happened next was what changed everything. Leah requested a debriefing. Not with her instructors, with the Commandant himself. Commandant Thar was a legend. A Xylanthian who had commanded the Galactic Fleet during the Scourge Wars, who had personally negotiated the ceasefire with the Hive Mind, who had been offered the position of Supreme Commander, and turned it down because, as he put it, "I prefer to be where the fighting is." He was old now, his chitin faded to gray, but his 4 eyes still burned with the fire of a younger being. "You requested this meeting, Cadet Chun," he said, not looking up from his datapad. "I assume you have a reason." "I do, sir." "Then speak." Leah took a breath. Scenario 47 has never been won because the assumptions built into it are wrong. The attacking force is too powerful, the nebula too limiting, the defender's resources too scarce. Everyone who plays it assumes they have to fight the battle as presented. But that's not the only option. Thar looked up. His eyes were ancient, measuring. "Go on." The scenario brief says the outer colonies have already fallen. It doesn't say the colonists are dead. It doesn't say the infrastructure is destroyed. It doesn't say the supply lines are cut. The attacking force is advancing through the sector because they think it's empty. But what if it isn't? You're suggesting guerrilla tactics. I'm suggesting that the Academy teaches fleet battles. Fleet-to-fleet engagements. But that's not how wars end. Wars end when one side decides it's no longer worth fighting. And the way you make it not worth fighting is by making every step cost more than the enemy is willing to pay. Thar set down his datapad. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then, he said, "You're the first human to attend this academy. Did you know that?" "Yes, sir." "Do you know why?" Leah hesitated. "Because humans aren't considered strategically relevant." That's the polite way of putting it, yes. Thar stood up, walked to the window, and gazed out at the gas giant below. The Galactic Council classifies species by their military potential. The Vrakther are rated Alpha. Their physical strength and aggression make them formidable warriors. The Xylanthians are rated Alpha. Our tactical acumen and technological development are unmatched. The Relians are Beta, useful in support roles, but not frontline combatants. Humans are rated Gamma. Gamma, Leah repeated. Gamma is the lowest rating. Below Delta, below Epsilon. Gamma means your species is not considered capable of meaningful contribution to galactic defense. It means your worlds are designated as protected zones, not because you're valuable, but because you're too weak to protect yourselves. It means that if a real war comes, The Council's plan is to evacuate your colonies and abandon your homeworld. Leah felt something cold settle in her chest. I didn't know that. Most humans don't. The information is classified. But you're not most humans, are you? You're here. You're winning simulations no one else has won. You're carrying Vrakther across deserts and finding water where there is no water. Thar turned to face her. I've been watching you, Cadet Shin. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. Your species is a mystery to us. You have no claws, no chitin, no natural weapons. You're not fast, not strong, not psionic. By every objective measure, you should be irrelevant. And yet, Leah said softly, here you are. The Academy changed after that. Not officially, nothing had changed. But cadets started treating Leah differently. Not with friendship, exactly. With respect. The kind of respect that comes from watching someone do something you thought was impossible and realizing you might have been wrong about them. Drask, the Vrakther who had called her a pet, became her training partner. He pushed her harder than anyone else, forced her to learn combat techniques that humans had no business learning, and never once apologized for the dead fish. I was wrong about you, he said one day, between sparring matches. That doesn't mean I like you. It just means I won't underestimate you again. Vel, the Hern, became something like a friend. The two of them would sit together in the observation deck, saying nothing, watching the stars. Vel's species communicated mostly through chemical signals, and Leah couldn't perceive most of them, but she found the Hern's presence calming. And Vel found something in her, too, a patience, a stillness that the other cadets lacked. Jorvith, the Relian from the observation deck, became her closest ally. He was brilliant, not in the flashy, tactical way that the Xylanthians valued, but in the quiet, methodical way that noticed patterns no one else saw. Together, they studied the Academy's training simulations, mapping the biases built into each scenario. It's rigged, Jorvith said one night, his large eyes reflecting the glow of his datapad. Not intentionally, but structurally. Every simulation assumes a certain kind of warfare, direct engagements, clear lines of battle, predictable outcomes. It's designed to reward Xylanthian thinking. What about Vrakther thinking? Leah asked. Vrakther are the hammer. Every problem looks like a nail. They do well in simulations that require brute force, but they struggle with anything subtle. And humans. Jorvith's ears twitched. Humans aren't in the simulations. Except when you are. And when you are, you break them. Leah frowned. Break them? Scenario 47 was designed to be unwinnable. The instructors wanted to see how cadets handled inevitable defeat. But you didn't accept defeat. You found a third option. Jorvith looked at her with something like awe. That's not Xylanthian thinking. It's not Vrakther thinking. It's something else entirely. Something none of the simulation parameters accounted for. That's not a good thing, Leah said. If I'm breaking the simulations, I'm not proving anything. I'm just exploiting loopholes. No, Jorvith shook his head. You're proving that the simulations are wrong. That the assumptions they're built on are wrong. And that's more important than any victory. The message came 3 months later, on a day like any other. Leah was in the training yard, sparring with Drask, when every datapad in the Academy lit up simultaneously. The alert tone was one she'd never heard before, a deep, resonant pulse that vibrated through the floor. Emergency. Emergency. All cadets report to Assembly Hall immediately. This is not a drill. Drask lowered his practice blade. What is that? Leah was already running. The Assembly Hall was chaos. Cadets from 100 species filled the benches, murmuring in confusion and fear. Instructors stood at the front of the room, their faces grim. And on the massive view screen behind them was an image that made Leah's blood run cold. A fleet, not a virtual fleet, a real one. Thousands of ships, dark and angular, arranged in a formation she recognized from her studies. The hive mind, the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. The enemy that had pushed the Galactic Council to the brink of annihilation during the Scourge Wars. The enemy that had been dormant for 30 years. The enemy that was now awake. Commandant Thar stepped onto the podium. His voice, when he spoke, was steady, but Lia could see the tremor in his hands. The hive mind has re-emerged. Their fleet is advancing through the outer colonies. We have lost contact with 17 worlds in the last 6 hours. The Galactic Council is mobilizing, but we are not prepared. We are not ready. We may never be ready. He paused. The room was so quiet Lia could hear her own heartbeat. This academy was founded to train the next generation of commanders. That generation is you. You're being graduated effective immediately. Your ranks are provisional. Your commissions are emergency appointments. You will report to your assigned vessels within the hour. The galaxy needs you. Chaos erupted. Cadets shouting, crying, embracing. Lia stood frozen, watching the view screen, watching the dark fleet advance. And then she saw something no one else noticed. The hive mind's formation was perfect, mathematically perfect. Every ship precisely positioned, every angle calculated, every distance optimized. It was the kind of formation that Xylanthian tacticians dreamed of, efficient, elegant, unstoppable. But Lia had studied human history. She knew about perfection. She knew about the Maginot Line, the French defensive masterpiece that the Germans had simply walked around. She knew about the Byzantine Empire, whose flawless strategies had been undone by a door left unlocked. She knew that perfect formations had perfect weaknesses, flaws so subtle that only someone looking for them could find them. And she was looking. The assignment came through an hour later. Lia was to report to the Xylanthian Star, a dreadnought serving as the flagship of the Galactic Fleet's 3rd Battle Group. Her rank, Provisional Lieutenant. Her role, Tactical Analyst. Her commanding officer, a Xylanthian admiral named Kveth, who had never commanded a human and had no intention of starting. You will observe, Kveth said during their first meeting, his 4 eyes fixed on her with undisguised disdain. You will take notes. You will not speak unless spoken to. Is that clear? Yes, sir. The hive mind is not a simulation. There are no loopholes. There are no third options. There's only combat, direct, brutal, and unforgiving. Your species has no experience with real war. Do not pretend otherwise. Lia said nothing. She simply saluted, returned to her quarters, and began to study. The quarters were small, a bunk, a desk, a view screen. She pulled up every piece of data available on the hive mind, their tactics, their technology, their biology. She cross-referenced it with historical battles, with academy simulations, with the thousands of pages of strategic theory she'd memorized over the last 3 years. And she found something. The hive mind wasn't a single intelligence. It was a network, billions of individual organisms linked together in a telepathic web. The web had nodes, hubs where information was processed and decisions were made. Destroy the nodes, and the web fragmented. The individual organisms would continue fighting, but without coordination, without strategy. They would become animals. The problem was the nodes. They were protected by the fleet's most powerful ships, surrounded by layers of defensive fire. A direct assault would be suicide. But what if you didn't assault them directly? What if you attacked the network itself, flooded it with noise, with false information, with so much input that the nodes couldn't process at all? It was called a denial of service attack. Humans have been using them for centuries, long before they left Earth. The principle was simple. Overwhelm the system with garbage until it choked. Lia wrote up her analysis and submitted it to Admiral Kveth. He rejected it without reading it. Human nonsense, he said, handing the datapad back to her. We fight with ships and weapons, not with data. Focus on your assigned duties. Lia took the datapad. She walked to her quarters. She sat on her bunk, stared at the wall, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Anger. Not hot anger, the kind that made you scream and break things. Cold anger, the kind that settled in your bones and waited. The kind that said, fine, you don't want my help? I'll help anyway. And when you're drowning, you'll remember that I tried to throw you a rope. She started with Jorvith. The Relian was assigned to a scout ship, the Quiet Eye, running reconnaissance on the hive mind's advance. Contact was difficult. The nebula interference was getting worse, and the hive mind was jamming military frequencies, but Liao found a way. She always found a way. I need you to run a diagnostic on the hive mind's communication nodes, she said, her voice crackling through the encrypted channel. Jorvith's ears twitched on the view screen. That's insane. Those nodes are behind the enemy's front line. I'd have to send probes through, not through, around the nebula, the ion clouds. The hive mind thinks those are obstacles. They're not. They're cover. Jorvith was quiet for a moment. Then, you're serious. I'm always serious. The Admiral is going to get us all killed. I need data. Real data. Not the sanitized reports the command staff is distributing. Liao leaned closer to the screen. Please, Jorvith. I can't do this alone. He sighed. His ears drooped. You're going to get me court-martialed. Only if we lose. Fine. I'll send the probes. But if I'm executed for insubordination, I'm haunting you. The data came in over the next 72 hours. Terabytes of it. Sensor readings, communication intercepts, tactical analysis. Liao processed it all, cross-referencing, pattern matching, looking for the flaw she knew had to exist. She found it. The hive mind's network had a heartbeat. A pulsing signal that synchronized the nodes, keeping the billions of individual organisms in perfect alignment. The signal was faint, easily drowned out by the noise of battle, but it was there, and if you could disrupt it, just for a moment, the network would fragment. The nodes would lose contact with each other. The fleet would descend into chaos. But disrupting the signal required precision. You couldn't just jam it. The hive mind would adapt. You had to hit it at exactly the right frequency, at exactly the right time, from exactly the right position. It was a sniper's shot, not a bombardment. And there was only one ship in the fleet that could make that shot. The Xylanthian Star. Liao went to Admiral Kveth again. This time, she didn't submit a report. She requested a face-to-face meeting. She brought printouts, actual physical printouts, because she knew the Xylanthian respected tangible things, and she laid them out on his desk like a hand of cards. The hive mind's network has a synchronization pulse, she said. Every 2.7 seconds, the nodes broadcast a signal that keeps the system aligned. If we disrupt that signal, the network fragments. The nodes become islands. The fleet becomes prey. Kveth stared at the printouts. His four eyes moved back and forth, reading, processing. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, the synchronization pulse is buried beneath layers of encryption and electronic warfare. How do you propose to disrupt it? The Xylanthian Star has a harmonic resonance cannon. It's designed to disable enemy ships by disrupting their power cores. But if we recalibrate it, retune it to the pulse frequency, it will propagate through the network. One shot, one pulse. The whole system collapses. Kveth's expression didn't change. The resonance cannon has never been used for such a purpose. The recalibration you're describing would require. I know what it would require. I've done the math. The tolerances are tight, but they're achievable. We have the engineers. We have the equipment. We have the window. The hive mind is advancing through the Kethros Nebula. The ion interference is scrambling their sensors as much as ours. They won't see us coming until we're in range. We have one chance, Admiral. One. Kveth picked up one of the printouts. He studied it. He set it down. He picked up another. This is insane, he said quietly. Yes, sir. It is. If it fails, we're no worse off than we are now. But if it works, Liao met his eyes. If it works, we win. The battle began at 0600 the next morning. Liao stood on the bridge of the Xylanthian Star, watching the view screen as the hive mind's fleet emerged from the nebula. Thousands of ships, dark and angular, their hulls gleaming with the iridescent sheen of organic armor. They moved in perfect synchronization, a single organism with a million limbs. Admiral Kveth stood at the center of the bridge, his posture rigid, his four eyes fixed on the enemy. All ships, he said, his voice echoing through the fleet's communication channels. The hive mind believes we are weak. They believe we are fragmented. They believe we are afraid. He paused. His gaze flicked to Liao, standing at her station in the corner of the bridge. They are wrong. We are not weak. We are not fragmented. And we are not afraid. Today, we show them what happens when they underestimate us. Today, we win. The fleet surged forward. The first wave of hive mind ships met them with a wall of fire. Plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, energy beams. The space between the fleets became a maelstrom of destruction. Ships exploded on both sides, their crews vanishing in flashes of light. Liao watched it all, her heart pounding, her hands steady. She was not in command. She was not in control. She was a tactical analyst, nothing more. But she had placed her pieces on the board, and now all she could do was wait. Enemy formation is holding, someone reported. They're not deviating. They won't deviate, Liao said quietly. Not until we give them a reason to. Admiral Kveth heard her. He turned, his eyes narrowing. You're certain about this? I'm certain. Then, we do it your way. He raised his voice. All ships, execute maneuver Delta 7. Draw their fire. Give the star a clear shot. The fleet scattered, breaking into the individual formations Liao had designed. Destroyers dove into the asteroid fields. Cruisers vanished into the ion clouds. The carriers launched their fighters, swarming the enemy like insects. And the Xylanthian star, the flagship, the dreadnought, the most powerful ship in the galaxy, headed straight for the heart of the enemy fleet. Range in 30 seconds, the weapons officer reported. Resonance cannon is recalibrated and ready. Hold fire, Kveth ordered. Wait for my command. The hive mind saw them coming. Hundreds of ships turned, their guns tracking the star, their targeting systems locking on. The defensive screens flared as the first volley struck, the ship shuddering under the impact. Range in 20 seconds. Liao gripped the edge of her station. Her knuckles were white. Range in 10 seconds. The enemy was close now. Close enough to see the individual ships, the organic curves of their hulls, the pulsing lights of their communication nodes. The synchronization pulse was visible on her sensors, a rhythmic beat like a heart, like a drum, like a countdown to annihilation. Range in 5 seconds. Admiral Kveth raised his hand. Fire. The resonance cannon discharged. There was no sound, space was silent, but Liao felt it in her bones. A vibration that traveled through the ship, through the fleet, through the nebula itself. It was the frequency of the hive mind's heartbeat. And for one perfect moment, that heartbeat stopped. On the view screen, the enemy fleet went dark. Not the lights, the coordination. The perfect synchronization shattered. Ships that had moved in unison began to drift. Formations that had held for hours dissolved into chaos. The communication nodes, deprived of their pulse, started broadcasting on random frequencies, their signals overlapping and canceling each other out. The hive mind was blind, deaf, fragmented, and the galactic fleet was not. All ships, Kveth roared, attack. What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The hive mind ships, disconnected from the network, fought as individuals, bravely, desperately, but without coordination. They couldn't reinforce each other. They couldn't share targeting data. They couldn't even retreat in good order. The galactic fleet tore through them. Within an hour, the hive mind's advance had been shattered. Within 3 hours, their remaining ships were in full retreat. Within a day, the Galactic Council was declaring victory. But the real victory happened on the bridge of the Xylanthian star, in the quiet moment after the guns fell silent. Admiral Kveth turned to Liao. His face was unreadable. Xylanthians were not an expressive species, but his voice when he spoke was different, softer, almost human. How did you know? Liao thought about the question. She thought about her grandmother, who had recited novels from memory. She thought about the persistent hunters on the savannah, chasing prey until the prey collapsed. She thought about the Maginot Line, about the Byzantines, about all the times humans had looked at perfect formations and found a one flaw no one else could see. Because I'm human, she said. And that's what we do. The news spread faster than light. Not through official channels. Those were clogged with after-action reports and commendation forms. Through the unofficial networks. The channels that cadets used to talk to each other, to share gossip, to spread the stories that the command staff would never tell. A human did it. The one from the academy. The one they called the Ghost. She found the flaw. She made the shot. She won the war. Within a week, Leah's face was on every screen in the galaxy. Her name, her battle name, the one the cadets had given her in whispers, was on every channel. The Ghost of the Academy. But she wasn't a ghost anymore. She was the most visible human in the galaxy. And for the first time in history, the Galactic Council was asking a question no one had ever asked before. What else can humans do? The answer, Leah knew, was simple. Anything. Everything. Whatever needs to be done. Because that was the thing about humans. They didn't have claws, or chitin, or telepathy. They didn't have perfect formations or flawless strategies. They had something better. They had stubbornness. Creativity. The refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat was the only logical outcome. They had the ability to look at an unwinnable scenario and find a one flaw no one else could see. And when the galaxy finally understood that, really understood it, the ratings would change. The Gamma classification would be revised. The protected zones would become something else entirely. Not colonies to be abandoned. Homes to be defended. By the species that had learned, long ago, that the greatest weapon was not strength. It was the will to keep going when everyone else had given up. In the years that followed, Leah Chun became a legend. Not because she never wanted to be, but because the galaxy needed a story. A story about the quiet cadet who had sat in the back of every lecture hall, taking notes, waiting for her moment. A story about the species everyone had dismissed, the species that had shown them all what true strength looked like. But if you asked her about that day, about the resonance cannon, about the synchronization pulse, about the moment the hive mind's fleet went dark, she would tell you something different. She would tell you about Jorvith running reconnaissance against orders, about Drask training her until her bones ached, about Vel sitting with her in the observation deck, saying nothing, being present. She would tell you that no one wins alone, that even the quiet ones need someone to believe in them. And then she would smile, that small, human smile that the galaxy had learned to recognize, and say, but it helps to be underestimated. They never see you coming. The Xylanthian High Command officially revised humanity's military classification 6 months after the battle. The new rating was not Alpha, not Beta, not even the experimental Omega class they were considering for species of exceptional strategic value. They created a new classification entirely. They called it the Chun class. And when asked why, Commandant Thar, old, gray, but with fire still burning in his 4 eyes, gave an answer that was broadcast across every channel in the galaxy. Because humanity taught us that strength is not measured in claws or ships or technology. It is measured in the willingness to look at the impossible and say, not today. The Ghost of the Academy was silent no longer. And the universe would never forget her name.